Alright, so audio in Animate. Let's see. So what we need to do is have a file that is Action Scripting 3.0. Again, any other type of file is you're gonna run into technical difficulties of a variety of sorts. We're gonna stay at 24 frames a second for all of this. Whatever you do, make sure you don't change the frame rate after you add audio in. We're gonna go File, Import, and we're gonna import it to the library. Just so it's easier to kind of keep track of things. I'm just going to import a couple different files. And they show up there. They look like audio. You can actually test them out. You can listen to them in here. Little play button.
The Tale of Custard.
Enough of that. But in order for them to show up in the timeline, we have to have enough frames, right? I mean, technically it will show up on this first frame, but then you can't listen to it. You can't see the waveform. It's kind of difficult to notice. So we're going to come in here. And we need, almost 30 seconds worth of material. So we're going to go all the way out, and we're going to use insert frame, not insert keyframe. Insert a regular blank frame, because as soon as you insert a keyframe, the audio is going to restart. And we're going to show that in a minute. But then what we do is, when we put it in here, you're going to see the waveform in the timeline. But oddly enough, you can't drag this into here. You have to drag it to the stage. Which is why this is now going to be, this layer is now going to be the audio layer. And that's all it's going to be. And then nothing else is going to go on this layer. And in fact, when you're done setting up the audio, you should probably lock it. Just because it's very difficult to manage because you can't select the audio. What I can do is select the timeline and go to Properties, and it will list the audio. And I can change to the other MP3 if I need to from there. But you'll lose your settings that I'm about to go over, so I don't recommend that. Because if you edit this all nice and then you change audio tracks, poof, goodbye. So one thing we're going to do is we're going to right click on the layer and go to Properties, and we're going to make the layer height 300. Because now you can actually see the words, and I like this audio track because we can see the actual phrasing, and so I know he's saying here a tale of Custard the Dragon, an Ogden Nash poem, but I've heard it often enough that I can see where the words are, which is always a little bit easier. All right. Another thing you might need to do, or that you will need to do, excuse me, let me put this back to where it was. When you first bring in the audio, any new computer you're working on, the setting it's going to use is under sync. It's called event, and that's very bad because it's not going to sync up properly. Event is something that was used when Flash was making web things, and there are buttons that ching-a-linged every time you clicked on them. It's no good. So before you do anything else, you need to click on this timeline, go to sync, and change it to stream. I'm probably going to say that 3 more times in this video because it is super, super important. If you do not do this, your timing will be wrong. Because when you play in here, it's going to start the audio from wherever it wants. You can hear, by the way, it scrubs through now. That's how you know it's working. If it's not scrubbing through the audio, something's wrong. But what'll happen is if you don't set this to stream, you'll think your timing is different, and the audio will play at the right speed regardless of if the video is playing at the right speed, and so you'll alter your video differently, and it'll seem like it's never quite syncing up because it's not. And then you'll go to test the movie with Control Enter, and it will look completely wrong. So the other thing to remember is that Control Enter or Control Test is the only timing that counts.
The Tale of Custard the Dragon.
If you're watching it in here without testing the movie, that's not the real timing. So you do that to get, the bulk of the animation in, but then you have to test the movie. Control Test or Control Enter on your keyboard. All right. Now the next thing you might need to do is deal with the audio a little bit. If you have any strength with Audition, I recommend using that. I have a review video up that kind of goes over the basics of Audition. It is a much better program to alter audio in. If you need to, take out the middle of things, I'm going to show you how to do it in here. It's not awesome. It's very clunky. But bare minimum, you'll be able to trail the audio off at the end because right now it's not going to work properly. It's just going to stop. And we don't want that. We don't want... find the end of that phrase. We don't want it getting to the end and
Pet
just
dragon.
pop. No, 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 no. Unacceptable. So even if you don't use Audition, here's what you do. First step is you click on the timeline and you go to this little pencil looking button over here, and it says Edit Sound Envelope. And you'll see what looks like nothing. But if you zoom out a little bit, which is a little magnifying glass with a negative, it turns out we were just looking at the first second, which is nothing. It's dead air, and it's very fuzzy dead air. I know this recording is very fuzzy. I apologize. One thing you can do is you can pull this bar to get rid of some dead air if there's a lot of it, or if you don't want to use the first stanza, whatever it is. In this case, though, I'm actually going to leave this because it's good to have a little bit of dead space at the beginning, because otherwise your animation has to start right away, and that doesn't really work well, right? So there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of dead space and maybe having a title, like not a sequence, but just a title to your animation. But if we zoom out a little bit more and then we scroll through this, there it is. We see this line. This is telling us where our frames end. And I was listening, and it was at the end of a stanza. It was at the end of a section. And so this is a good place for it to end. You can see it's a whole lot longer. We don't want all that. These are seconds, by the way, not frames. I know most of the numbers up here are frames. These are seconds. Go figure. So what we need to do is we need to fade this out. So I'm going to go zoom in a little bit. And unfortunately, it moves. It doesn't zoom in on here. It zooms in on where this is. So I have to keep moving back to, there we go. To keep moving back to frame 29. Nope, can't change that. And what I can do is there's something called envelope points. The levels are actually this bar right here and this bar right here. It's stereo sound, there's two channels. And right now they're up all the way, meaning we want to hear all of the audio. If I click once, I get an envelope point. That's going to say, hold this up to here until this point. It's like a keyframe. And then I click here, another envelope point. And you can see it does it for both channels simultaneously. And if I lower both of them, it allows me to lower the sound to nothing. If you bring it all the way down to the bottom, there won't be any sound. And you'll see that in time. Whoop, nope, nope, don't want that. All right. Well, shoot. Just drag the extra off to the side because we're not using that anymore. There we go. You'll see that in time they're in sync, but not in volume. And that's so if for some reason you needed to control left and right. But so you have to lower both of these. Now once I hit OK, it does that. Now we don't see anything, right? But if we listen to it, just kidding, I have to be up here.
Pet dragon.
You can hear the fuzziness fading away, which is why you're not going to hear a pop at the end. And I can always go back in, and getting to that particular point is a little bit of a pain because I have to zoom it out again. There we go. And I can make it a little bit longer of a fade. So you kind of have to like do this work. And there is a way to preview in here, but it's not easy because you have to start at the beginning, and I don't want to listen to all 30 seconds. So I just hit OK, and I come back out here and I listen to it here. That's nice. Nice little slow fade. All right, so those are the things you have to do with the audio. Bare minimum, whatever you're taking from, I don't care if it's got less fuzz than my audio here, you had better be fading that audio out, because if I hear pops, that's just lazy. Right? And you should be setting up your audio before you start animating, because there's nothing worse than getting all your timing in and realizing you have to change something. So you get your audio in, you make sure there's not too much junk space here, and you get your edit in at the end to have it fade out nicely. That's your bare minimum. You're also making sure your sync is set to stream, which is going to, anytime you're starting on a new computer, when you import sound, you're going to have to redo that. right? So you're not going to be able to save this setting. It will save for this file, however. So if I hit Control S to save and I call it my midterm, that's bad. No, 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 we don't call it that. Or actually, this is our final. I call it last name, my last name, and final. It will save this setting, but if you like test some stuff out and then you go to a different computer later on in a different day, it's gonna automatically go to event again. So be aware of that. These files are in the library. They are in this file. This file is now larger than usual. Because it has audio files in it. So your animate files, your FLA files, if we actually take a look at let me grab, here we go. These are various times I've shown this project in the class. And you can see that all the FLA files, they're actually like 12 megs and 9 megs. That's much bigger than what is usually the case. Here's some other things that we've done in class. They're 12 kilobytes. Right? Like that's not, we've never had file size as an issue before in here. But now the audio is in there, so you don't, I mean, I would keep these anyways just in case, but you don't have to worry about them unlinking or anything like Premiere. But it's now going to take a minute to submit this right to the class or to the homework assignment, right? And actually, if I save this to the right location, examples, midterm setup, there we go. So if I save that there and I hit Control Enter,
The Tale of Custard the Dragon.
so it made that Swift file because your final you have to submit both to me. Benvenuto final, that's smaller because it's really compressing the sound. One thing you can do to alleviate that a little bit if the sound sounds really terrible, file, publish settings. We haven't talked about publish settings too much, except for those of you who are always like, take off hidden layers, because we don't want hidden layers there. But see this audio stream? This is terrible. This is like so tiny. Stream is the one you want to change. So we're going to change this to 128 kbps, which is kilobytes per second. That's basically how much information per second they're cramming it down into. You can choose or choose not to convert stereo to mono. And quality is best. We want the best quality. If I hit OK and I hit Control Enter,
The Tale of Custard the
that's
Dragon.
actually so much clearer. I mean, obviously, you're listening to it being processed through a video recording of my headphones that is then processed on YouTube, so heaven knows what yours sounds like. But for my end, that's way better. And if we look at the file, it's gotten bigger, but it's still way smaller because it's an excerpt, right? It's a 30-second excerpt of a song, and there's only one audio track, not two, right? So there's two full songs in this file. There's only a 30-second clip of a song in this file. And I think it's a little bit further compressed. I think these are like 192 kbps, which Animate can't even handle, I don't think. So make sure you're changing your publish settings to match what you're going to need. And we don't have to worry about file size for our class. You're not going to have a huge file that you're dealing with when you're handing in the Swifts, and probably not when you're handing in the final. So don't worry too much about that. And you just want to make sure it sounds clear. If you have any issues with it not sounding correct, let me know right away. Like email me not only that you're having a problem, email me the flash file, the .fla file, and the audio file separately. Both of those things so that I can just like take a look under the hood and see what's going on. It might just be a setting in here. It could be that something went terribly awry and you want to re-export your stuff from Audition. Whatever it is, you want to know as soon as possible, because if you've changed the timing of this at all, that's going to be an issue. All right, so let me know as soon as possible if you have any problems. Oh, and one last thing. I said before, don't put keyframes in here. This is what happens when you put a keyframe on your audio layer. All right, so that is all for audio.